Hello, I'm Gavin Horgan, Headmaster of Millfield School in Somerset, the largest co-educational boarding school in the UK. Welcome to the Millfield Way Podcast. Here, you'll hear from teachers, coaches and students from Millfield and Millfield Prep School. Millfield is traditionally different, and this is the Millfield
Way. Hello and welcome to this Millfield Way Podcast. My name's Liz Webb and we have broken with tradition on the Millfield Way Podcast for this episode as I'm joined by two guests to talk everything about EdTech at Millfield. We're going to hear from Assistant Head Academic Dr. Adam Gutteridge and Director of Educational Technology Stuart Maddock. Good afternoon to both of you.
Afternoon, Liz.
Afternoon.
Thank you for being here. So let's get straight to the point. What do we mean, Adam, by educational technology?
Well, technology, I'm a classicist, Liz. So technology, ultimately, the word originally is ancient Greek, techne, and it means craft or something that you use to make something else. And it's really important that we think about anything that we use to make our education simpler, more straightforward, to achieve our aims is a kind of educational technology. A paper and a pen is EdTech. So anything that is deployed in a way to help us in our education process is educational technology. Now, I know that obviously times have moved on since we were using abaci and styluses and all of this sort of thing. So when we're talking about educational technology in a classroom setting now, we mean something that is significantly more sophisticated than a paper and a pen. And that's probably at that point where I'm going to have to hand over to Stuart.
Thanks, Adam. So I think one interesting way perhaps of looking at it is maybe referring to, I think it was digital learning as well, and how we use digital as opposed to analog in that context. So for us, it's about, as Adam says, identifying those educational goals and those needs, and not necessarily pushing digital onto those, but seeing where the digital technology would support it. And it's about then making the most effective learning environment for our students in that way, be that resources that teachers are using or the way in which the students are using the digital products themselves. So really it's about enabling effective teaching and learning, and always it's a focus on pedagogy. It's a focus on teaching and learning first, and then if the digital can enhance that, can support it, then there's a place for it. And if there isn't, we make that conscious decision to not use it.
So Stuart, your role is to direct where we're going in the school with educational technology. What does it involve? When did you take up the post, and do you work across the whole school?
Yeah, so I started the role in September 2019, which is about 6 months before COVID lockdown came along. So that was definitely a baptism of fire. And I think just on that point, we definitely had a huge learning curve with regard to supporting our students with remote learning. But the fortunate thing was we were already in a position where we all had iPads, staff all had iPads, and we're used to, at least had been introduced to the Microsoft suite that we use, Teams and OneNote, etc. So I think since that time, the school collectively, the staff have made great strides in the way in which we use the technology. In terms of my involvement, I think in a nutshell, it's best described as supporting both my colleagues and students in the effective use of digital learning. So I work training and offering professional learning and development opportunities for colleagues, and that might be one-to-one, that might be one-to-few with a couple of colleagues who are interested in developing a particular area. It might be one-to-some in the form of working with departments who specifically want to work in a particular area, and of course there are whole school strategy which we are all encouraged to work with, and that those sessions can be face to face, and they can also be. I've made a number of instructional videos which colleagues can access as well, and increasingly now we appear to be the back end of COVID, I can get into the classroom and physically be in the classroom with my colleagues, and that's great because it allows them to get on with their teaching and learning, and I can just smooth the way to enable the technology to work hopefully as seamlessly as possible. Yeah, but further than that, there's close links with the prep school. Jonathan Ford, who's my counterpart down there, and I also sit on the IT management committee where we meet regularly to discuss these issues and other technology-based aspects.
Okay, fantastic. There's obviously an awful lot of technology out there. What do we use regularly at Millfield? And I imagine it changes quite frequently with new things coming out. And did it change quite a bit during COVID?
Yeah, so obviously COVID was huge for us all, and we all had to learn very quickly. But as I just mentioned, we were already using the Microsoft suite of apps. So Teams is our main one, and we use OneNote as our platform for students. I refer to it as the digital exercise book, which I think students are able to get their heads around, and that makes it easy for students to be able to access their work, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But we also use other apps, such as, it used to be called Flipgrid, it's now just changed its name to Flip, where students can make videos of their understanding, and we can assess their conceptual understanding of various topics. And so that's really useful. There are also a plethora of quizzing apps out there that we can use for formative assessment. So Socrative, Quizlet 2, they won't be quizzed so much on the information that they know, but it will bring back the content that they're less secure on to help them to get that clear understanding. So yeah, we're really Microsoft, but we obviously use a range of different apps and subject specific according to the subjects that require them. Yeah.
And so how do all those things, how do they help the students, and also how do they help the teachers?
So from a student's point of view, obviously you're aware, Liz, that we have a number of SEN students on our roll. So I think the concept of accessibility is really, really useful. In fact, a game changer for many, many people. If I give you an example, through Microsoft there's a function called Immersive Reader, which turns text in, the software will read text for the student. And I can remember showing one of my students in lesson just recently that this function existed, and her response was literally, "This is a game changer for me," so that she can now turn that into a written piece for her. She can change the speed, and it makes it so much more accessible in that respect. And that's just one example. But accessibility, font sizes, we can change the colour of the background so it's more manageable for our students. And also with regard to accessibility, with OneNote, everything is really easy to find. It's in one place, and so in terms of organisation, it enables our students to know where their work is. And so in terms of accessing the content, they can do that without too much hindrance. Yeah. In terms of teachers,
in terms of teachers, it's not dissimilar in terms of it's an organisational aid, it's an organisational tool. So on a really straightforward level, a teacher, when they're marking, they won't have to take home a large pile of books. In an evening, they'll be able to take home just their iPad in order to go through lots of student work, mark it up with the stylus, and that will allow them to be more efficient about the way in which they do their job. They'll be able to devote more time to the actual quality of the feedback rather than the logistics of getting a pile of books from here to there. But think about that in a classroom. In a classroom, a teacher can have an iPad in their hand and they can be able to see all of the work that's going on. It's so much more simple for a teacher to interact with the work that a student is doing simply by being able to look on their screen and be able to instantaneously see 12 different students' work as it's going on. And they're able to mark and feedback live, so instantaneously as the student is writing. So that's a tremendously powerful tool. But also in terms of organisation, and this is very interesting, in terms of assessments, teachers will be able to be quite sure that every student has been given their prep, has been given their homework. That the students say to me, I have really interesting conversations with students about how they like the ability to have their prep set on the portal that we use, or via an assessment on OneNote. And they say, it's great because I know I am no longer able to get away with the excuse, I didn't realise I had it.
Yeah.
So there's a real clear baseline. Teachers know what they're setting. Students know what they're expected to do. Deadlines are there. They're in black and white. Teachers can mark and feedback. and nobody is at risk of losing anything. Folders don't exist. Everything is there on the OneNote. Everything is organised, and really we're helping students and teachers to be more efficient about how they organise their education.
Can I just pick up on 2 points, Aaron? I think there's really interesting there about when, as teachers, we're looking and monitoring and we can see students work in a classroom. If someone has produced a really great piece of work, a lovely paragraph, or shown the workings and the maths as it should be, really, really simply, by screen sharing, we can put that piece of work up onto the board, and we can ask either the student who's done it or other students to work with that, engage with it, articulate and explain why it's a good piece of work, or vice versa, how could we improve on this piece of work? And that makes it so real. So, we're not waiting for a piece of work to be done. I'll take it in, perhaps I'll get around to looking at it tomorrow afternoon if I'm not too busy, and then get it back to them next Friday, which means that moment is gone. So I think your point there is really, really valid. And I think the more we do that, it's just so immediate for the students that they can really see the learning and appreciate that. And the other one was about this efficiency. So let me give you an example. With OneNote, we can sit videos onto the page as well. So what I know a lot of colleagues are doing are producing worksheets or some explanation, and then we can just embed or copy and paste a link to a video which sits on the page as well, which is so powerful because they've got a written explanation, but they've also got another format in which they can, see that information and then work from that. And one of the things that I'm encouraging students to do as well is create their own content. So they might make their own videos and sit those in there as well, so that they, we can then share that and feedback and assist from there.
And I can back that up with an example of my own. So at the moment in the lower sixth philosophy A level, I'm teaching Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism. I have a OneNote. So I'm the technology enables me for that to be taught in 4 different ways. I have my teaching of it, which it's the pedagogy that I'm doing in the lesson. On the OneNote, I have a textbook explanation, which I'm able to photograph and screenshot and clip, so I know I can guide exactly the students to read exactly the paragraphs that I need to from the accompanying textbook. I've got a YouTube video in the top right-hand corner, and then beneath that, I've got a link to Melvin Bragg's In Our Time podcast.
Yeah.
So I can say there are 4 different ways. There's me, there's textbook, there's video, there's BBC Radio 4.
Yeah.
Like, you can use all of them. It can suit your learning style.
Absolutely.
They're all there, and it's all in one place. I don't have to trust the student to be able to go and find it out for themselves. It's furnished for them, and that's really quick and efficient for them, and it's really quick and efficient for them.
And that brings me to another point, actually. We've had discussions over the years about, we talk about developing independence in our students and independent learning, and some might argue you would encourage students to go and find that themselves, and that would be independent learning. For me, my argument, my stance on this has always been, I'm going to open the door for you. I'm going to give you that opportunity to access that video, to access that podcast, because I don't want that to be a hindrance. I want you to be able to get to that content, so then you can grapple with the actual thing that's important for your learning, rather than, and that's what makes this so powerful, that it's, as you say, it just sits there, and it's all in one place for the students.
I imagine for many of those listening, this is a completely different way of learning to how they learnt in the classroom 10, 20 years ago or longer. With a large staff body that we have at Millfield, how do you keep the staff up to date with new technology so that they can get the most out of it? And how do we keep the students also on board with what they need to grasp?
Okay, I'll take that one. That's so really a large part of my role is to make sure that I'm aware of what's happening in terms of development. So I've very much got my finger on the pulse, outward looking in the industry about what is happening. As I mentioned, we work with our Microsoft suite, so I'm always aware of what's happening there. There are conventions and conferences which we'll attend. So it's very much being aware of what's happening, but also having that eye for, is this going to improve and develop what we're offering already? And again, taking the focus back down to the learning, and how is this going to help ultimately student learning and teaching, delivering of that learning. So the way in which I help staff stay up to speed is every Friday we have a bulletin, and often I produce a little EdTech Friday tip, which is usually in the form of a little bit of advice or a link to a video that I've made about a development, or did you know you can do this, some shortcuts, etc. We also have on our internal website a site called the EdTech Learning Hub, where all of the main platforms that we use, so Teams, OneNote, Microsoft Forms, which is a quizzing app, PowerPoint, for example, there are many how-to video instructional tutorial videos of how to access and use all of those, and that exists also for the students. Also for our students, we have an EdTech Learning Hub for the students, so they can go and see how to use OneNote or OneDrive. And also what we're encouraging, and I think we're being more increasingly successful with this, is encouraging the peers to help each other. So those that know how to do it or more familiar can support others. But as I said previously, we have professional development sessions, one-to-one sessions, and I'm increasingly in the classroom as well. But having said all of that, I think it's really important not to be carried away with the shiny thing that's just been released. Often those tend to be more of the same type of products. So I think I'm quite mindful of the latest releases of software, and we don't just go for the next shiny thing. And it's about what's right for us in our setting, our context, and for our learners. And in fact, with that, we've actually had a number of other schools coming to us to learn what we're doing, and we're kind of being seen as a brand leader in this respect.
So is there a way in which staff can share best practice when they come across things and they want to tell others about it?
Yeah, absolutely there is. As part of our sitting in our EdTech Learning Hub, I also host a podcast with colleagues, with staff, and they can share their experiences of using different software and their experiences and, well, their wins and perhaps things that haven't gone quite so well, because that's always a good learning experience of how they've used the technology in the classroom. So yeah, that's called Teacher Stories, and we've tried to put at least 2 or 3 out every half of term. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. As a parent myself, I worry about screen time for my children in and out of school and overexposure to screens for young people. What do we do here at Millfield to mitigate that, Adam?
It's a really good question, and it is one of which we are tremendously aware ourselves. The first thing to say is that we have screen time breaks within lessons. Every student has an iPad, but it's quite important that we don't think about the iPad as a one-to-one substitute for an exercise book. It absolutely isn't. It's a one-to-one substitute for a folder. So within a lesson, we have many expectations that students will they'll turn their iPads off and they'll focus on writing preparation. Not least because many of them will have to handwrite in an exam, but also just because it's important that we get them off screens in order to focus on their handwriting and just think in a different way. So students may be writing in a lesson on paper with a pen. All students need a pen. All students are equipped with a pencil case. They must be. And then once they've done that, then we can photograph that, or they can photograph that using their own iPad, which is uploaded into the OneNote system, so that paper-based work is not lost. So the iPad and the OneNote that's within it is effectively acting not as an exercise book, but as a kind of proxy folder. In terms of screen time, we know that young people, many of them, not all of them, but many of them like to game. So they're going to be on their screens for a proportion of the lessons that they're in. We use a classroom management piece of software called Apple Classroom. What that allows is a teacher to see the screens of all of the students within their room and to lock them into certain apps, or to be able to be alerted if a student, cheekily flips between the OneNote app and a game or online or things that they shouldn't be doing. So we're able to manage that. In terms of the wider issue about overexposure to screens, it's something that is tricky. We manage it in lots of ways. We talk to young people about social media and their dependence on it and the emotional depredations that it might wreak if they have an unhealthy relationship with it. And we do that through their PSHE lessons. We have at Millfield, we're tremendously lucky, we're full of sporting activities, we're full of the MAP programme of a Friday afternoon. There's a lot of outside space, there's a lot of inside space. So the young people have many other options in their lunch break, before school, after school, things that they can get involved in, rather than just being sat in one place, kind of scrolling through social media or playing games. So I think we educate, we manage, and we provide alternatives. That was what I would say.
Do you think our students understand about too much screen time themselves? Do you think we talk about it enough that they recognise that actually that could be an issue?
We can't talk about it too much. I think it does form a part of what we do within our PSHE curriculum. It's critically important that they understand the dangers, and that they understand their well-being. They understand how social media or screen time or both can affect that, and they have that education. We always want to do more of it. It's such a critical issue, not just for Millfield students, but for all the young people out there. And we're working on making sure that education goes deeper, is broader, is more embedded within houses, and all of that sort of thing. But it is something of which we are aware.
And you've both explained there's an awful lot happening at Millfield in terms of EdTech already. What are your plans for the future? What are you going to do next?
I think it's not so much about having to do something next. I think certainly embedding the good practice that we're doing now. We have a large number of new students that come in every year, so it's important that we don't neglect them and make sure that they've got their skills fully bedded as well. But I think looking to the future, we've got to be mindful of what is out there, and certainly there's augmented reality and virtual reality, which is beginning to make headway on the educational scene. I think for the moment I will be cautious and just be looking in from the outside as to where that goes. I think there are potentially great advantages to using virtual reality, but whether it can be used at scale, so whether all students can access it at the same time, I think still remains to be seen. And I think there's still some security and issues which we need to be confident about before we're using that. But that's certainly something to be mindful of going forward. I think also at some stage in the future, whether that be 5 years, 10 years or whenever, there will, I'm sure, be a time when public exams are no longer handwritten. I think that there will be using technology for those. And so we need to be adaptive to that when that time comes. And also, I'm really interested in the use in artificial intelligence and where that's going. So I know already some departments are using adaptive testing when they are testing and assessing. So, for example, languages, our EAL department, and we have a large number of, we have a good number of foreign students in at the school. They'll set up a test so that if someone has a relatively high degree of competency, they won't be asked all of the simple questions first. The technology will work out that you're quite able, and so we'll progress with more challenging questions. And I think there's a space for that, and that will be something which we'll look out for as well on the landscape.
It sounds very exciting.
And from my part, one of the things that is important to me thinking about 5 or 10 years' time, I'm in the process of looking at what classrooms might look like in 5 or 10 years' time, as Millfield has plans for what the shape of the school will be and looking at new building. One thing that's been abundantly clear to me over the course of my life, I'm an old man now, and I can remember when I was at school and in the 80s, and they talked about the future being computers in all of the classrooms, and these huge unwieldy pieces of kit. And actually, the more that I spend time around students and people like Stuart, who are field leaders, what we see about it is that we need adaptable spaces. We need spaces not that have huge pieces of unwieldy kit in them that then reach obsolescence in a matter of 18 months and need to be replaced. We need classrooms that will be able to adapt to portable computing, whether that is the next iteration of iPads or the next iteration of phones. We need spaces that will allow students to bring the computing power with them, not to have built-in heavy infrastructural hardware that will then gum up the works and get in the way of education. My image of EdTech at Millfield is nimble, is sleek, is lithe, is adaptable. It's not heavyweight, it's not large-scale infrastructure.
I remember us having a discussion before about if we went back in time, to the Victorian times, and the Victorian person came into not just our classroom at Millfield, but generally globally, and saw a classroom, they would recognise where they were, and things haven't changed in that sense of the structure and the layout and the set out of a classroom. I think it's definitely something we're working on, isn't it?
Yeah.
How we could reshape that going forward.
It's very exciting to hear. So we've covered a lot of ground. What would be your 3 takeaways for our listeners? Now, you might have 3 different ones. So, Stuart, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so my first one is this concept of accessibility. I've mentioned it a little bit earlier on, and it also for both students and staff. So accessibility in the terms of being quickly able to find content through the software that we use, but also for students, the accessibility in terms of content being read to them, content being presented in different formats so that it's very, very readily available to them in that sense. And also just the accessibility for the staff that Adam referred to with in terms of marking and being able to do it when you want to as well. You know, the days of we have to wait for the prep or the homework to be handed in and then we can only do it at that certain time. That's gone now. We can do it as and when, you know, we've got a little bit more wrestling back our own time in that respect. So accessibility, I think, is number one. Secondly is the affordance of assessment and formative assessment, and the fact that we can do it in real time and we can get a really good indication of where our students are and where the gaps are, where the misconceptions are, and we can respond to it in real time as well. Whereas previously, without the technology, we weren't able to do that. And then coupled with that, I suppose, is feedback, the way in which the technology enables us to give feedback, again in real time, but not just in the written format. We can leave voice notes specific to a certain piece of work or an area within the piece of work, and we can also leave video as well. So I think the ability to assess and to feedback in real time is absolutely huge, and certainly it's changed my practice.
And Adam, how about you?
I think probably, for the first, I would reiterate something that I've already said, which is that we are guardedly cautious about the way in which screen time can affect the overall holistic well-being of a student. It's not something that we expect all students to be staring at a screen for all of the time. So that we're very, very mindful about well-being, and we're very, very mindful of some of the risks of extended screen interaction, and that's something we're conscious of. The second thing I think is that, as Stuart said, again, we're very lucky with Stuart. We have somebody who isn't easily gulled or drawn to something that's new and shiny. You know, we have many teachers who say, well, actually, I found this new thing. Do you think this will work? And Stuart will work with them to understand a new product's limitations, its capabilities. We evaluate everything very, very carefully. Is this going to help this student? Is it going to help our teachers? And we really only push forward with it if it is. One of the things that we don't want is students and teachers feeling as though they've constantly got to keep learning a new thing. Keep learning a new thing. Here's a new thing we're bringing in. And we don't want that. What we want is stability. We want to be able to see products that work, that have actual demonstrable efficacy, rather than just here is a new thing that somebody is trying to sell or is trying to develop. And the very last thing is that I think we do EdTech in a way that honours the traditions of Millfield. You know, Millfield was founded to build the education around the child, not to expect the child to kind of meet the teachers and do exactly what is demanded of them. And I think we do EdTech in a very, very similar way. We look at the educational technological solutions that will meet the needs of individual learners, and we then build that around their needs once they're identified. We do not have a one-size-fits-all, everybody must do this, everybody must use that. We're adaptive, we're person-centred, and ultimately we use it if it will aid their progress.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Adam, Stuart, thank you for sharing Millfield's EdTech today. It sounds as though we will be embracing lots of new ideas and innovations in the future. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Millfield Way Podcast in conversation with Dr. Adam Gutteridge and Stuart Maddock. Thank you and goodbye.